Hello and welcome to your weekly podcast from Freestyle Media in partnership with the Magic 5, where you can get 15% off a pair of their custom fit goggles by using the link in the description to this episode. And do also check out Oxalt Strength and Conditioning. That is Nathan Oxford, the strength and conditioning coach, who has been working with swimmers up and down the country, been getting some cracking results for them. He was at Nationals last weekend. You probably saw him. Do check his stuff out. That's www.oxalt.com. We're joined once more by Jonathan Saunders of City of Sheffield, and of course a member of the Masters Working Group, to sort of round off our Nationals chat for the year, really. Discuss what went well, what feedback the group have had so far, that sort of thing. So first things first, Jonathan, thanks for coming on, and how are you?
No trouble, Joe. I'm very well. Very well, just having such a quiet weekend after the hustle and bustle of last weekend. I'm great, thanks, Joe.
It's definitely a different vibe this weekend. It's quite miserable and rainy, and it's a bit more of a chilled one.
Yeah. Well, it could have been wet and miserable last weekend, but we wouldn't know. We were stuck inside all the time.
Yeah, I can confirm I was wet quite a lot last weekend, but that was because of the swimming pool as opposed to the rain. But it's all good.
Excellent.
So the first thing to say is congratulations. News either may be out when this podcast goes out on Tuesday, or it will certainly be coming out, that your role has slightly changed. So you're actually the Swim England representative on the home country's Masters Working Group now. Congratulations on that.
That's correct, Joe. Thanks very much. Looking forward to helping out and doing what we can for Master swimmers. So not just across England now, but across the UK. So that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
Well, and it's something that we'll I'm sure we'll revisit throughout the next year and sort of see how things are going, and any developments would be obviously interesting to hear from. So congratulations and thank you from me and sort of on behalf of everyone, really, because it's volunteers like yourself that really make the dream work, really.
Absolutely, and I've benefited for that for 6-7 years. So I'm happy to help out in this role, but I'm sure as spaces come up on committees, I'll be looking around the master swimmers for some help.
Absolutely.
So watch out.
Yeah, for sure. So from I guess from your point of view, but sort of put your Masters Working Group hat on. Sorry. Sure. From that sort of point of view, are you happy with how the weekend sort of panned out?
Yeah, I think it went pretty well. It's always difficult. It takes a couple of weeks to unpack, and we normally have a formal sort of debriefing, as it were, afterwards, possibly when the results of the survey come out that we'll talk about in a bit. But certainly my recollection of the weekend, it went pretty smoothly. We had, I can't remember the exact figures, but something like 2,000 swimmers.
Wow.
3 days of racing. It all seemed to go quite smoothly. I know there was some hiccups with the relays for session 8, so the Sunday afternoon relays. There were a couple of hiccups, but they were kind of few and far between, considering what the teams and it's all done by volunteers, what they had to do. I think it went remarkably well. Officials and volunteers are excellent. You'll be glad to know that on Sunday lunchtime, while they were having lunch, Jerome and I went up and thanked all of the officials, timekeepers, everybody on behalf of Masters, all the Master swimmers. So that was quite a privilege to go and thank them for what they'd done, because without them, you and I wouldn't be able to race, and all those people who broke all those records, they wouldn't be recorded, which would be desperately sad.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, from my point of view, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on a podcast and talking to you, but it was a cracking weekend. And obviously I'm, not privy to a lot of the things that you've got planned. So sometimes things might not go to plan, and you would realise that, but I wouldn't, because I sort of didn't know what the plan was. But just as as a swimmer and as a general spectator, it all went really well. And speaking of the volunteers and the timekeepers, etc., and the judges, I like that we always kind of welcome them out with an applause. I think that's really important. And it's always a moment that I try and stop and, as I say, clap and just try and show some appreciation. I think it's an important thing to do. And I thought it was a cracking weekend. So I'm glad you guys did as well.
That's good. And I think some of the things we tried, like the 800 meters on the Saturday evening, I think my impression at the moment is that worked pretty well. It meant they didn't have to hang around until Sunday afternoon. It also meant a few of the swimmers were able to get off a little bit earlier if they weren't swimming the 800. So, we'll wait for the feedback, but my impression was that worked pretty well. I think the general program generally worked. I think it worked. We always get some comments because it'll never suit everybody. There's always somebody who's got a clash of races. But I don't think that was particularly any different to any other year that we've had.
Yeah.
But again, we'll look at that and consider what we do for next year.
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because for me personally, the schedule was fantastic. But what I would say is that, so I didn't swim any relays this time because unfortunately the club that I swam with, we just didn't have enough swimmers that come up from Tunbridge Wells, in order to put a team together, which was a real shame because that was the plan, but it didn't quite happen. So it meant that I was like super fresh for all of my races. Now, had we have done relay, the likelihood would have been that, because I did a lot of sort of the 50s and 100s, and they were, say, the first race of the session after the relay.
Yeah.
So, I think there would have been, I could have had a situation where I was relaying and then doing an individual swim pretty quickly after. But because I didn't relay, it was fine. And as I say, for me, I loved the order of it as well. I loved that I got the sort of the 250s, the flying the free on the first day, just to really get going. And so, from my point of view, it worked really well. But I can see why, if people were doing a lot of relays, why they may have found that difficult. But then you choose to do these relays, don't you? So it's
absolutely. It's what you prioritize, isn't it? We, as you know, as a club, we had, I think, 29 relays in. So we had to choose the 4 swimmers for each relay. It was dependent on what people had individually as well. So takes a bit of discussion, and it's entertaining. But it was good. I think the other thing that was really good for Masters swimmers that probably very few people were aware of is we had a guest for the weekend. So we had Joan Wheeler, who sits on the board of Swim England. I've had to write her titles down because she's got several of them, but the main one is that she's a main board member of Swim England. She's the chair of the Swim England Sport Operation Committee, and she's also a member of the Swimming Leadership Group. She actually voluntarily came along and was on the balcony next to Jerome and spent most of Friday and Saturday there. I can't remember if she was there Sunday, just because she wanted to come and see the Masters swimming, and she was very impressed with it. So I think that bodes well for what we want to do as a Masters committee with the help of Swim England. To get someone like her on our side is really beneficial. So that's a positive that most people won't be aware of and may not fully understand how beneficial that could be. But it was good.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And as you said, I'm sure that's the sort of thing that, when you're sort of doing behind the scenes committee meetings, it's a big coup. So it's brilliant. That's something else I would say is that my God, the standard is just incredible, isn't it? And it's getting better and better every year. And interestingly, some of my teammates who are sort of in their 40s and have been doing nationals for 20 years, they were saying, if you go back 15, 20 years ago, if you did a certain time on a certain swim, that would be considered really good. Now you're just middle of the road doing that sort of time on a certain swim, and it's unbelievable how fast people are.
Absolutely. That actually, it's interesting, Joe. That was one of my thoughts when we left on Sunday, just thinking how it's just so much more competitive than it was 2 or 3 years ago. Some of our relay teams, that when Jamie and I put them together, we just thought, that's a really quick team. That should medal. There might be 11 teams. They ends up coming 5th. And you think, that's 4 really fast guys, girls, or a mixed relay, whatever. But just the standard of the swimming was outstanding.
Yeah,
I think it's gone up a notch in the last year or so.
It definitely has, and for me, I personally had a very good weekend at nationals and got some times I was very happy with. And so, for example, in my 100 free, I went 56.2, and I'm still not in the top 10 in my age group.
It's amazing.
I think I'm something like 14th or something. But I mean, I think that's fantastic, and I think, well, how great is that we've got so many rapid swimmers, Not saying I'm a rapid, but these people are more quick than me, But I just
Dix is rapid, Joe. Believe me.
but I think it's fabulous, and I think it really shows how competitive we are. And I think I remember seeing a post on social media from Helen Gorman, who she sort of suggested she thinks this is the fastest nationals competition in the world. I think she sort of said, you'd struggle to
Yeah,
find a faster competition.
probably agree with that. I think potentially it's almost as hard to win a medal here as maybe the Europeans in Rome last year.
Yeah.
I think the quality of swimming in the UK at masters level is amazing.
Completely agree.
I think you see that in when the rankings come out each year as well. Either the European or the world rankings, or you watch the British swimmers overseas. That there's some outstanding swimmers, and we just try and keep up with them, don't we?
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I just want to talk about the survey actually. So, I was also a recipient of an email from you guys asking us to fill in a survey. If there's anything about the survey you'd like to say to people, obviously it'd be fantastic for people to fill it in.
No, just thanks for raising it. Yeah, please do fill it in. It's one that's really come from Swim England rather than the Masters Working Group. But just check either your inbox or your junk folders. Just please respond, because it's always helpful. We're always looking to improve the championship year on year. And without that feedback, it's difficult to take on board people's views. So I think if people haven't got that email, or they want to add something that they felt the survey didn't let them do that, then just message either Jerome or myself or Bob Bolton. Just message us direct, through Messenger or whatever vehicle they want to use. Just let us know what your thoughts were and what you liked and what you didn't like.
Yeah, I think it's an important point to make, and as I say, for everybody for everyone who fills the survey, and it's really helpful for you guys when you're planning for the next one, and not just nationals, but other competitions that you may organise as well, for sure. Just want to go back to the super quick swimmers actually, or super quick swimming that we saw, and I just wondered if there are any sort of personal favourites that you had, or any particular swims races that you just thought, wow, that really caught your eye.
I tried to write that down, Joe, because it's where you start. I started looking at it and I thought, I'm going to put them into two categories. So I'm going to do individual and relay, but on a personal level. When I started looking at it, I thought there's so many swimmers from across all the clubs. I mean, in my age group, Michael Hodgson is just outstanding.
Yes,
I think
unbelievable.
Every time he got in the water, I seemed to hear the record medley ring. So he was breaking either British, European, or world records, and he makes it look easy. Sometimes when I watch him, he's swimming. The time is so quick, but he makes it look fairly effortless. So I would put him in there, but. Across all the clubs, there's some outstanding swimming. But and then if I look at my individual club, we've got some people who are just setting PBs, and people competing for the first time. We had Frank Crocker, who's in the 18 to 24 age group, who just makes backstroke look so easy. Yet again, like Mike, is really quick.
Yeah.
Jonathan Leach, who has been struggling with all sorts of things, but came along and broke some PBs, which was amazing. Erzsébet Kiss, who came along not very well. I mean, she wasn't very well on the Friday, and she did the 400 IM and the 200 fly, and I couldn't do those when I was fit. So they were all impressive.
Yeah.
But the standout individual swim for me, because it's one of our own, is Ian Swift in the 200 breaststroke for City of Sheffield. He broke the British record by, I think, just over 3 seconds, nearly 3.5 seconds.
Wow.
And it's just a great swim, because if you watch it, he just looks so strong and controlled all the way through. Never faded. It just looked fantastic. But because he trains with us, we just see how much effort he puts into training. We always like a chatter in training, but when we finish some of our hard sets, he's struggling to breathe, let alone talk. So to see that pay off with him breaking an individual record was outstanding. And you probably heard the noise from our club all sitting up together. It was quite a racket they made. And then the other one I've put is in the relays, it's City Sheffield again because I'm biased, but our 200 plus team in the mixed 4x100 medley, which was Susie Hegg on the backstroke, Ian Swift on the breaststroke. Always good to have a British record holder on that one. Jamie, of course, on the fly, and then Larissa Davis, who's a fantastic swimmer. She's a born racer, even in training, in the warm-up, the swim down, when we swim in the lake on a Saturday morning. If you're next to her, she just can't help race you. So it's taken us a while to get her racing in the pool, but she did the final leg and was being chased down by a guy from Teddington, who's in my age group.
Yeah.
And she held him off and I think finished 0.2 of a second ahead of him. And it was such an exciting finish to the race because you get those with the mixed relays of people being chased down. And it was, it's always good to be on the right side of the chase. So
I agree.
Those are my highlights. But as you said earlier, there's such outstanding swimming. You could pick one of 20, 30, 40 races, couldn't you?
Yeah.
How about you, Joe? What did you enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, foremost, I agree with what you said there. There were so many amazing races. Personal favourite for me was the 800 on Saturday night, watching Dan Mills win. I just,
of course, yeah,
so good. I mean, it's funny because we talked about this on the podcast pre-nationals. We said, the middle distance events are the most fun if you get a neck on neck, and of course he had that scenario, and won by about 1.5 seconds, which over an 800.
800 meters, that's nothing, is it?
It's nothing at all, but it was just fabulous. And he's a phenomenal swimmer. He's so good to watch. So that one was fantastic. Thinking about like the 200 as well. I mean, James Wardle. I've watched him swim many times now. I'm still waiting for him to get out of second gear. The guy is so relaxed when he swims, and yet he's so fast. I think he's one of the most effortless swimmers on the eye that I've sort of ever seen, really, certainly at a masters level. And then Michelle Ware winning the 50 freestyle. What a heat that was! I mean, there was some like swimming legends in that heat. The aforementioned Helen Gorman was in the heat. Helen Sadler was in the heat. I mean, there was
one of our friends who swam for us, Tina Wilson, was in that heat as well. I think she came second or third. I mean, rapid swimming.
It really was a heat full of really, really good swimmers.
Yeah,
and Michelle Ware's turn was just like, I mean, it's important not to get carried away with these things, but I don't think I've ever seen a better turn in my life. Like,
wow.
when she got to the wall, it was, I mean, obviously this was just 25 meters at this point, but it was a very close race, and she just left them. She just left everyone on the turn. It literally is as if she sort of looked at Helen Gorman next to her, gave her a little wink, and said, "See you later." And she just and I just watched it, and I was in awe. I thought that was phenomenal because I've never seen her swim before Michelle.
Okay.
So it was privileged to see her. Actually, it really was.
And you can see why when you pair up Michelle with Mike Hodgson,
yes,
David Bryant, and one other, you can see why their relay team is always breaking records.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We had one of our relay teams. We were swimming against them. I think we came second or third. But you're playing for almost the also-rans.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes it's in those scenarios, it's better to be watching it than be in it. Because I sort of think, let's say Mike Hodgson, for example, like just smashes a record. It's nice to be able to watch it rather than trailing in his wake, in 2 lanes down from him, and then you don't actually get to kind of appreciate the moment that everybody else has just sort of witnessed, really.
Yeah. Good swimming. Yeah, some outstanding swimming.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, in terms of your own personal journey, you've obviously been quite vocal about the operation that you had a couple of months out from nationals, and your big thing was getting back for nationals and trying to be as fit as you could be. Just tell us first and foremost about the recovery and the journey that you sort of went on, really.
Yeah, or even the injury. I mean, for those that haven't seen it. It happened at the British Championships back in end of May, beginning of June, on the Saturday night. I remember just before I went to bed, sort of thinking, everything was feeling a bit sort of tender and painful, thinking that's not quite right. But then as you do, you go to bed, you get up, and you go for a day's racing. So there was one day left. We had relays. I had the 100 freestyle. I went to break my PB in the 100 freestyle on the Sunday morning, and I hadn't realised quite what I'd injured at the time. And then, so I had a good day on the Sunday. Sunday evening, I got home and I was thinking it's still really tender. And I think I knew what it was. And I'll explain what it is in a few minutes. But being a traditional bloke, and I wouldn't advocate this at all, I kind of thought for 2.5 weeks I did nothing. I thought if I ignore it, it'll go away, which is growing up in Worcestershire, that's a very Worcestershire farmer kind of thing to do. After 2.5 weeks, it hadn't. So my wife, who's a doctor, I asked her to have a look, and sure enough, I went to see the specialist, and it's a hernia which is kind of just below your trunk line, as it were, on your jammers. Not a major one, but what it resulted in. And I had a chat with the surgeon. He knows my wife because she's a consultant anaesthetist, and explained that I had the nationals coming up at the end of October. So I went to see him, and he said, "Right, Jonathan," he said, "I can operate on the 26th of July. You've got 4 weeks. You can do absolutely nothing, and then you can get back into training. You should be okay for the end of October." Right. So that's what we did. Friday the 26th of July, I had the op. And I think two things. One, I probably was still thinking I was 20 and you recover from operations quite quickly. And in my mind, I was still thinking, well, it's just a small op. You know, people have hernias all the time. But actually, it wasn't keyhole. It was an open cut. So about the sort of length of your finger, the scar's about that long. You know, right. It's... and you don't realise how much you use your core for everything. Yeah. So the first few weeks were very painful, and it just took. So he said I could go for walks, but when I set off for a walk on the Saturday after the operation, so the next day I thought, right, I'm going to get out and go for a walk. I thought I looked like a 90-year-old man walking up our road, but I was determined to get out and keep moving. And it's two things. One is it took quite a long time, and I think it was important to try and keep a positive mindset. But that was kind of difficult as well because it's so painful. It was painful, you know, and sore. You're thinking, is it healing properly? Is it not healing properly? But I mean, the other thing I made a little note here about you're never alone in the masters world. Because I got so many positive messages and comments from master swimmers who'd obviously seen my comment when I did the podcast with you about the qualifying times.
That's right.
So lots of encouragement and advice and help and just general positivity, which is great. You know, the Harrogate ladies were very kind. Karen Graham, really helpful, lots of advice as well. And then... so 4 weeks was August, no training at all. Then I started, we were doing a little bit of training as a squad. So it worked quite well because the city of Sheffield shut down for August. So beginning of September, I was going in with our squad, but not in the fast lane. I was in what I call the rehab lane. and all I could do was very slow freestyle and backstroke and very tentative because it was still quite tender and you don't want to undo anything. And I saw the surgeon at the end of that week and he looked at it and said, "Yeah, it's all fine. You can't undo what I've done, but it will be sore while it still recovers." Yeah. So the problem then was I was away for a week. At a week's holiday, we went to La Santa, which was fine. So that was just a week of gradually doing, again, easy swims to build up. Home for a week for training. Then we went away on leave for another week with some friends at the lakes. So that was no training. So by the time all of that was over, it was effectively 7 weeks. And I'd only had really 1 week of training getting back. And then by then it's 5 weeks to the nationals. And it was getting slightly worrying of how's all this going to work out? Because I think actually it was 4 weeks and the last week's taper week. So it's kind of, this is just hopeless. And I think I put a comment out there saying the nationals are 3 to 4 weeks too soon. But, you know, our coach was excellent. she just said, look, get in the lane, just do freestyle. Because I said to her, I'm not doing any butterfly this year at all. I don't want to risk. I know the surgeon said you can't undo it, but I'm just going to be sensible.
Yeah.
And I would say the beginning of October, I was thinking, am I going to race at the Nationals or not? That was probably genuinely thinking, I just don't think I'm going to be fit. And I was worried about relays. I don't mind not doing well in my individuals, but I don't like letting my teammates down in relays. But we just carried on training, just trying to ramp it up as much as you could. Some of the things I found that were interesting, people say, listen to your body. Absolutely, because when my 4 weeks were over of nothing for 4 weeks, so 4 weeks and 1 day, we swim in the lake on a Saturday morning, and I went that Saturday morning, put my wetsuit on, and did a 400-meter loop, which is, normally we'd be in there for 3-4K. 400 meters, and what I found is I thought I was fine, but until you stretch out in the water, as soon as I stretched out to swim freestyle, I suddenly realized how tight it was.
Yeah.
Because you're properly stretched out, and I thought, okay, that's not painful, but it just needs a bit of work. So for the next 2 weeks, it was on the yoga mat, just lying there in the streamline position, just rolling from side to side, just to stretch everything. And I think that's that kind of thing that you have to listen to your body, and if you've got to stretch things, you've got to stretch them, and if you need to rest them, you need to rest them. So it was an interesting build up to the Nationals, because I genuinely thought I wasn't going to be properly ready for it. The one real positive, 2 weeks out on the Monday, so not the Monday of the Nationals, but the Monday before that, Abby, our coach, who's absolutely fantastic, said we'd have a proper race night. So we had to bring our racing jammers, racing goggles, hats, and we were treating it as a proper race night. So not just going hard, but off the blocks, timed off the blocks. And that was good for me, because a couple of weeks before that, we had the Steel City Masters, which was a Masters meet. We talked about, we wanted to host 2 to 3 years. We chatted about having one. And then when we finally had the chance to have one, I decided not to swim it, because I thought, I'm not ready to race. I don't want to risk injuring myself.
Yeah.
Abby left me to it, and I finally messaged her and said, I'm not going to race. I'll time keep all day so I can be involved, but I'm not going to race. And she messaged me back and said, I'm glad you made the right decision.
Yeah.
I wanted you to make that decision rather than her tell me. So that was quite weird and a bit upsetting. Our very own Steel City meet that I couldn't swim in. But we did the race night, Monday night training off the blocks, and the times were pretty reasonable. And more importantly, it didn't undo anything.
You felt
nothing hurt, and it felt okay.
Yeah.
So then we just had that last week of training, and then it was time for taper week and the Nationals. It was hard. I think the one thing I found recovering from injury is you just can't rush it.
No.
In my mind, I thought I'd be back racing or training hard much sooner, but it was very much each week you just had to slowly build up.
Yeah, I think what's interesting though is that having Nationals probably sped up your recovery anyway, because you were probably more diligent in your recovery. Even things like you said, like getting on the yoga mat every night. If you didn't have that goal of I want to make Nationals,
good point.
You may have just been a bit more relaxed about things, and then it may have been 2, 3, 4 more weeks until you felt where you now feel, for example. But you were so focused on trying to get to the finish line, as it were.
Yeah,
that probably helped.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. And even just making sure I was going for some good long walks each day.
Yeah.
Lots of stretching, and but also trying to do the training. Just take my time building up. I remember there's some difficult times that week in September and early October, where I was in the rehab lane, plodding along quite slowly, watching Jamie and Swifty and Tim Gleeson in the fast lane doing flat out sprints. And
Yeah.
I remember at one stage I was sat at one end while I was waiting 20 seconds before the next block, looking across, thinking, should be in that lane,
Yeah.
and just thinking they look like they're having. I mean, they probably weren't having fun because none of them could breathe. But I was just thinking that looks so much fun. I want to be sprinting, but
Yeah.
So there were tough times going through it, but it's worth taking your time and recovering properly. And I think that's one thing Abby said to me after the Nationals is she was really pleased that I took my time and tried not to rush it. And I guess the older you get, and I'm quite a bit older than you, Joe, the older you get, the more important that is. You suddenly realise that you're not 20 anymore.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm glad you've shared that story, because I think injury is something that we all experience. We'll have different injuries. Some are big, some are small, some are niggles that you kind of just train through. And I think it's important to hear experience that people go through, especially trying to get fit for a competition, for sure. And so yeah, thanks for sharing that. And it sounds to me as though, based on what you said about not wanting to let your teammates down, that the relays really were the priority for you going into that weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. When I entered the Nationals, I entered only 3 individuals because I knew that I couldn't do butterfly. So I entered 50 free, 100 free, and the 400. Bizarrely, I did the 400 free at the Cheshire Sprint Meet, which is odd because it's 400 metres, so I'm not quite sure how that snuck in there. It's the first time I'd done it for a long time and really enjoyed it. And so I did just 3 individuals rather than 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Normally at the Nationals, I'd probably do a total of 10 or 12 races, and this time I only did 6, purely because I didn't want to blow my brains out.
Yeah.
And probably, yes, I think you're right. The relays, for me, are the focus. I always love relays, and I'd probably prioritise those over individuals. So I had a good selection of the two. I think just going back to the injury bit, Joe, before we go on to my racing, I think to anyone out there, if you have got an injury that don't do what I did, which was the 2.5 weeks of hoping it'll go away.
Yes.
I think, talk to somebody about it, either talk to your coach, because coaches are generally fairly good on that kind of thing, but certainly go and see your doctor. I think the sooner you see it, the better. But also just talk to your coach. Our coach, Abby, is brilliant. And if she knows you've got an injury, she'll make sure that you're doing the strokes or the drills or the right timings to make sure that you're not hurting yourself, so that your rehab's working. So, always talk to your coach and your teammates. Don't bottle it up, because they don't get better if you bottle it up.
No, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that's all makes perfect sense. And again, thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
Talking about relays, you're actually in charge of organising the relays, weren't you?
Yeah.
How do you find such a job? It sounds like, especially with a club your size.
How did I get the job, or how do I find it?
How do you find it? I mean, it must be a mind. I don't want to say the word on a podcast.
I know what you mean.
Yes.
It's interesting. I mean, to be fair, Jamie and I do them together. So I might be bizarrely the face of City of Sheffield Relays, but it's Jamie and I do it. It's 50-50.
Yeah.
And actually, we quite enjoy it. The one thing we love doing is trying to get the best out of the squad. And we've got, as always with any squad, you've got a selection of people breaking British records and people racing for the first time. And it's trying to make sure. I had a chat with Bob Bolton, because, of course, whilst we had 29 relays at the Nationals, I think Trafford had something like 56, I think. It was over 50 relays.
Amazing.
Which I think would probably give me a mental breakdown trying to do that many. But it's just good fun. It's a little bit like a kind of cross between a Sudoku and a crossword. You've got these age groups that you've got to hit, and you've got a long list of swimmers. So I just, for a bit of fun, put out, that's my database of all my swimmers.
Wow.
So the top part's all the male swimmers.
Yeah.
Then you've got all the female swimmers.
Yeah.
And then all of the distances with their best times. So you've got ages and times, and then you've got to put them into relays. And it's It's just trying to make sure that you don't rely on some swimmers too much and end up giving somebody 8 relays and somebody's only got 1. But you also want to try and target the relays that you really want to win, or try and, we've been lucky enough to break records in a couple of relays. So Jamie and I do that, and we often have a bit of a chat with Abby about it as well. This is the final version that went to Ponds Forge with lots of graffiti on it.
Right.
And I think that was about version 10 or 12. And then there are people that got crossed out as well, because we had 3 or 4 swimmers dropped out with injury or illness.
Okay.
And I think chatting to Bob, they were about similar, about 1 in 10.
Yeah.
About 1 in 10 dropping out, then you're trying to plug gaps in relays, because you want to make sure that you never want to be in a position where you can't swim a relay team. So you're trying to get people in of a similar age or speed, and it can be a bit stressful. And I have to say, it was a bit stressful Sunday morning, because it wasn't helped by the fact that the relay declaration system went down as well, so you couldn't do it online, and we had some injured swimmers, and it was Sunday morning was a bit stressful. I didn't see much of the racing, but a lot of it was spent doing paperwork.
Oh, that's a shame. No,
but it's good fun.
Yeah. It does sound like a fun job, actually. It's again, you've got a lot of swimmers, so there's a lot to get through. But it's certainly something that you think, it's all tactics and how can I get the best out of this relay team and that person, and it sounds like an intriguing job, actually.
And that's why you need a few of you to do it, because you bounce ideas off each other. It works well.
For sure. So the final thing then is just on your racing. How did your racing go, and are you pleased with how they went, your times? And obviously all the caveat here is that you've returned from injury. But yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised, because I went on the Friday partly with a bit of trepidation, because I love the run up to Nationals Week, partly because it's taper week, which everybody loves taper week because that's just fun. I always quite like the fact that in the week before the big competitions, I can feel myself getting nervous. So, but I kind of learned to embrace that and think that just shows that I care. I'm taking it seriously. But I think that week before this time was significantly more nervous, just because, not for my individuals, but as I said, for the relays. I had 3 relays, 3 individuals, 3 relays, and I didn't want to let anyone down. So I think there was an element that the last time I went racing for 3 days, that's when I got the injury. So
of course,
there's, in the back of your mind, there's that, I don't want to do that again. I wasn't sure if I could do it again, but I didn't want to. So my first race was the 50 freestyle on the Friday, and my PB's 27.9, I think, 27.8, 27.9. And I just kind of went into it fairly relaxed, thinking I'd be happy with the 28 with the build-up I've had, effectively only 4 weeks of training. But I was expecting to, when I stopped to look at the board and see it said 29, so I wasn't expecting that much. And I did a 27.9, so it was
brilliant.
Just within 0.1 of my PB. So happy with that. The 100 freestyle on the Saturday, I actually broke my PB.
Wow.
So that's kind of, I was slightly gobsmacked by that.
It's the magic pool, the magic water.
Magic pool, yeah. It always helps if you race with a City Sheffield hat on. It always makes it quicker. And then the 400 freestyle on Sunday afternoon was within 0.1 of my PB as well, which, so, I'm getting old, so my PB's 4:58.
Right.
I think it's 4:58.7, and I did a 4:58.8.
Wow.
So, again, I was expecting to be over 5 minutes, just because 4 weeks of training, I just thought there's no fitness there. I'm going to really struggle. But it was pretty much bang on. So really pleased with that. And then the relays, we got a gold in one. We won our men's 4x200, which is one of our strong relays. So really happy to get a gold medal. And we got a silver in. I can't remember what the other relay was that we got the silver in. So gold and a silver and a PB. So to say I was pleasantly surprised was an understatement. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I thought maybe I'll get the other side done if it's that good.
It's why it sounds like a really successful weekend on a personal level in terms of how your racing went. You've done fabulous in your relays as well. I mean, taking a gold, must be
Yeah,
amazing. And then from I say from an organisational point of view, as well. Sorry, it sounds like it all went great. And just to reiterate to people to fill in the survey, obviously, Jonathan and the gang would really appreciate that. And yeah,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
yeah, thanks so much for jumping on this podcast again, chatting to us, and yeah, look forward to the developments from the working group.
absolutely. No trouble, Joe. Good to speak to you again.
Yeah, thank you very much.
See you in a pool soon.
Certainly will. Yeah, bye.
Brilliant. Cheers, Joe. Bye.